Hello, everyone, and welcome back to We Rise Together, Charting Pathways to STEM Careers podcast. I'm your host, Rawan Al Ghamdi, and for today's episode, I thought we could talk about an important tool in our career progression.
Many of us, at one part of our career or another, have had the experience of being in an important meeting, and you really want to prove yourself or you want to share this awesome idea you got that you know will have a greater impact. But as you start speaking, you find yourself frozen or flustered, and the words are coming out all wrong. I've been in many situations like that, which made me realize that you can be brilliant at what you do, but if you can't communicate your ideas effectively, advocate for yourself, or navigate those tricky workplace dynamics, you're going to hit a ceiling. And for women in STEM, we face even more unique challenges, from being talked over in meetings to second guessing ourselves before we even speak up. That's why I'm especially excited about today's conversation. Today's guest has spent years studying exactly this. She's helped managers, and teams communicate clearly, confidently, and intentionally. Cynthia Kane is the CEO and founder of the Kane Intentional Communication Institute, author of the Pause Principle, and a certified meditation and mindfulness instructor. Her work has been featured Her work has been featured in Business Insider, The Washington Post, Thrive Global, and so much more. Cynthia, welcome to the show, and we're very happy to have you here.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here with you today.
Great.
Yeah.
Cynthia, I'd love to hear your story. What led you into mindfulness and communication? And what inspired you to dedicate your work to helping leaders thrive in the way that they communicate?
Yeah. So I got into this work in a very roundabout way. I was a very challenged communicator. Let's just say that. I was very passive aggressive, had a very hard time expressing myself, had a lot of difficulty in silence. I would shut down a lot, walk away a lot. Just, it was very challenging for me to communicate. And I didn't realize it at the time. I just kind of thought like, this is how it goes.
Yeah.
And I ended up losing my first love very unexpectedly. And when that happened, it really threw me into this tailspin of trying to figure out how to enjoy being in the world again. And so much of what ended up coming out from this period of just, a lot of reading and going to seminars and taking classes and all this, trying to figure out how to feel better in the world. What I found was that communication was a really big piece of everything. And I was understanding this, but I couldn't really get the information that I wanted. Like, how does this actually work? And a friend of mine introduced me to a meditation and writing workshop that was happening at the Shambhala Institute when I lived in New York. And so I went that weekend, completely changed everything for me. It's where I learned meditation. It's where I learned the elements of right speech in Buddhism, which are to tell the truth, don't exaggerate, use helpful language, and don't gossip. And I thought, okay, this is really my way out of suffering, in a sense, right? The discomfort that I'm feeling. This is how I'm going to be able to change the way that I'm interacting in the world and living in the world. But, I had absolutely no idea how to do it. Like, it all sounds really wonderful in theory, right? Just be kind and honest and helpful. Like, that's lovely. But how do you actually do it? And so that's when kind of this lifestyle experiment began for me of really practicing mindful communication and really paying attention to how I speak to myself. Then that changed the way that I was interacting with others and, the world in general. And what I ended up doing was writing a lot about what I was experiencing. And so I ended up writing, my first book, How to Communicate Like a Buddhist. And then that turned into courses. And that then led to people really being interested in more trainings. And so, I have a training program that I've been running for a very long time. And what I started noticing over the last couple of years was the increase in companies paying for their employees to take my training program. And so that was really interesting for me to start seeing. And what I was realizing was how important this work is within businesses, organizations, nonprofits, you name it, because
Yeah.
we're in really challenging interactions day in and day out, stressful interactions day in and day out. And how do you stay in the room and have a conversation even when it's really hard and everything inside you is screaming to shut down, walk away, stay quiet, not say anything. And so that's really where the pause principle came from, which is, how to keep cool in tough situations, because it's really geared towards managers and, top level CEOs and things of that sort, because it really does begin in these places, right? At the top, where if we can start to see communication patterns being modeled in a really kind, honest, and helpful way, it will then trickle down, right? So
Wow.
that's kind of how it all came about. It's not, I didn't set out to teach people how to communicate or to become more responsive. It just was so profound in my life. And then I wanted to share it with others, and it was working for others too. So it became my passion, really.
Wow.
Yeah.
Then you started reflecting what went wrong and how can I be better, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's dive into our first segment. For women in STEM, and myself included, communication can be such a challenge. There were times where I stayed quiet in a meeting, even though I had something valuable to share. And other times when I did speak up, and I immediately wished that I had said it differently. And I know so many of our listeners could relate to that. So when we're in a high pressure situation, or we're stressed or nervous, it's easy to get flustered. What's one practical tip that you recommend for staying calm and collected in those tough conversations?
Yeah. So I think the biggest piece to begin with really is starting to pay attention to your body. So you're starting to notice what's happening in your body during these challenging interactions or around the table. So you're paying attention to the sensations that are happening in the body, meaning, maybe your jaw gets tight or clenched, or maybe you feel kind of queasy in the stomach, or maybe you feel your heart beating faster, or like heat. For me, it's like heat just rising in the body, right? And so we start to see that as a cue to know that we're about to react in the same way that we usually do, right? We're about to get quiet. We're about to just put our head down. We're about to, say something we don't mean. And so the first practice is really just noticing that discomfort in the body. Then once you notice the discomfort, then you can do a breath pattern, which will help calm the nervous system, so that you find that calm, so that then you can interact in the way that you want to. So a breathing pattern would be inhaling for 5. You can do it now. We can inhale for 5. Hold
You
for
mean
5.
5 seconds?
Yes.
All right.
Inhale for 5, hold for 5, and then exhale for 5. And you can do that twice. And
Amazing.
then, right? And then in that moment, your nervous system is calm. So it's once you have a calm body, then you have a calm mind, and then you have calm words. And so the first piece is really pay attention to the sensation. Once you notice it, grab a practice that's going to calm the body. A great one is a breath pattern. Inhale for 5,
Yeah.
hold for 5, exhale for 5.
So the first thing is like being aware of your
Yeah.
body's reaction, and then trying to do something to calm you down. And I think like the breathing exercise that you mentioned is very easy to do, and like you can do it, no one would notice that you're doing it, right? So
Yeah.
it's all in all like a great exercise in those situations.
Mm-hmm.
For a lot of us, we keep quiet in a meeting because maybe of our, okay, let me say that again.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we keep quiet in a meeting because of our fear of being overlooked or interrupted. Of course, when you're a young woman in a male dominated field like STEM, the likelihood of that is even higher.
Mm,
How can be um, how can how can being more intentional with our communication help us ensure that we're actually heard and taken seriously?
yeah. So when we're intentional with our communication, what's required is this awareness, right? This awareness of what's happening. So we're very conscious. So if we're in a meeting and we're speaking and expressing ourselves and someone interrupts us, right? Our work in that moment is to notice the interruption,
Yeah.
right? Then once the interruption is finished, right? Then we get to say, in this moment, I'd like to get back to what it was that I was talking to, right? Or we get to say, thanks so much for interjecting that. It's time for us to get back to what it was that I was saying. So we have to start becoming aware and noticing the interruption and not letting the interruption dictate our next move, meaning we step back, we get quieter again, we don't continue. It really is the piece that should push us forward to take that empowering steps to say, okay, now it's time to get back to what it was that I was sharing, or I'd really like to finish my thought, or right, and we go from there. The other piece too, I think, with intentional communication that helps is we're really starting to speak more concisely, right? So we're being conscious of the words that we're speaking, but we're also speaking in shorter sentences. We're not over explaining. We're not putting, cherries on top and sprinkles and whipped cream. We're really looking for the specific pieces that we need to express.
Yeah, and I think this is a great sign of confidence as well, right? When you're direct and straight to the point.
Yes.
Now, I mentioned and then you mentioned intentional communication.
Mhm.
Now, just to be on the same page, could you please explain what intentional communication is for our listeners?
Yeah. So intentional communication is really speaking in a way it's kind, honest, helpful. It's necessary. It's non-judgmental, and it's really deliberate, right? So you're really paying attention to the way that you're speaking and making sure that it is um, really aligned with being kind, honest, helpful, and non-judgmental. And that's really what it is.
Yeah. Another form of communication that
Mhm.
we often go into, let me say that again. Another form of communication that we use in our daily lives at work is presentations. And,
Mhm.
and presentations are nerve wracking, whether we're presenting our research to a peer or we're speaking on a big stage, right? What's a good strategy for tuning those nerves into presence and connecting with our audience?
Yeah. So I always recommend before a presentation to get some of the energy that's inside out. So it really is kind of shaking a lot of that energy out of the hands. Like before a presentation, you're just going to shake your hands, you're going to shake your feet. You can, even if you have an office with a place where you can put music on, you can put your favorite song on just to like dance it out, right? So that you can show up and your body's a little more relaxed, more calm. What you're doing though in the moment is, again, you're paying attention to the sensation in the body. So when you start to feel that flustered feeling or that overwhelmed feeling or the nerves kind of building, right? You're
Yeah.
going you're going to pause. You're going to stop and you're going to tend to it. So you can either pull down on your earlobes,
Yeah.
right? You can, sometimes you can rub the sternum, that can help too. Other times you can just tap on your fingers. If you're standing, you can make a fist and push your fist into your leg. Like if you're at a table, you're sitting down, people can't really see that very much, right?
Yeah.
So again, you're taking the nerves, the sensation, and you're using it as a cue. So you can do a practice like one of the ones I shared, or in that moment, in the pause, it's a small moment, right? So you're starting to train other people. to slow down as well. So you feel that sensation in the middle of the presentation. Maybe you're getting flustered and you don't remember what it was that you were saying.
Yeah.
You notice it, you take a breath, and you tell yourself, I can do this. I've got the words. I know what I'm saying. I'm going to take care of myself in this moment. When you turn toward yourself in that moment,
Yeah.
you'll calm your nervous system and then you'll be able to talk. So you're taking time out of the urgency of your presentation to tend
Yeah.
to yourself and then begin again.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. It does. So it's like, instead of spiraling in my head and trying to, like, for example, if I flustered, then everything that I'm gonna be thinking about, oh my God, I made a mistake. I said that, and
Right.
then my performance is gonna degrade, like, instantly, right? And
Yeah.
then the more I think about it, the more I spiral, the worse it's gonna go, right?
Right.
But what you're saying is that if we take a pause,
Mhm.
tend to ourselves, and calm ourselves, this pause, which could take, I don't know, 15 seconds,
Right. It's very
will put us back to, to the same performance that we were doing, right?
yes.
Better.
And so it's in that moment you're acknowledging that you're freaking out, right? Like you're
Mm-hmm.
acknowledging that you're flustered and you're saying to yourself, okay, you're flustered right now. It's totally fine. We've got this. We can do this. We can keep going, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're interrupting the pattern of the old cycle, right?
Yeah.
With a new frame of mind.
Yeah. Great. That's a really nice advice. Yeah. Okay, so we said communication, and I think whenever we say communication, we often mean a two-way communication, right?
Mhm.
Usually involves two or more. Uh, Something that we don't talk about enough is our inner voice and how we talk to ourselves. How can we flip the script of the self-talk so that we can walk into a meeting feeling confident and like we really got this?
Yeah. So I think a big piece is starting to notice the way that we talk to ourselves now that's not helpful, right? So
Mm-hmm.
starting to notice when we're talking to ourselves in a way that's hurtful or unhelpful. When we notice that we're doing this, that's our cue, that's our choice point to be able to say, oh, okay, I know right now that I'm talking to myself in a way that's creating more fear, more anxiety, more doubt. And I want to do something different right now. So I want to talk to myself in a way that's kind and that's helpful. And so we start to see ourselves as somebody that we want to be friendly towards in that moment, that we
Yeah.
want to be supportive of in that moment. And to give support, what that actually looks like is accepting and allowing ourselves to feel maybe insecure at that moment or
Mm-hmm.
nervous at that moment, and then instilling confidence by saying, okay, I'm feeling really nervous about this upcoming presentation and I can do this. I've got this, right? Like last week I had the same feeling and did I make it through? I made it through, right? Yesterday I was, nervous about turning this project in. I turned it in, I made it happen, and look at where I am today, right? I'm
Yeah.
still here. So we start using language that really builds the confidence by showing that we can support ourselves. So whatever supportive language looks like is what we want to try to
Mm-hmm.
do. It's not becoming your biggest cheerleader, right? Because sometimes it can feel fake. It really is about,
Yeah.
is this kind, honest, and helpful?
Mm-hmm. And just to be clear, does that only count when we talk about to, when we talk to ourselves regarding our, like, professional tasks, or do we need to do this, just generally speaking, being like compassionate and supportive of ourselves throughout the day?
Yeah, throughout the day, generally throughout the day, right? I mean, think of how many instances there are throughout the day that we get down on ourselves. I mean, let's see, it's noon here. I think probably I've been up since 7. I mean, I've had like tons of moments where I've been like, oh, Cynthia, really? Come on, you know? And so in those moments, it's a matter of me being able to have the awareness like, oh, that's really not helpful for me right now. I want to be
Yeah.
kind to myself. I want to help myself move through this moment. So what's the next right thought or the next right action for me to do that?
Yeah. And, generally speaking, like now we're in the season of like the new year, and
Yeah.
this is the season where we get down on ourselves, right?
Yeah, we have to be better. We have to figure out our plan for the new year to like, whether it's finances, whether it's fitness, whether it's diet, right? There's always something that we want to better. And I think that that right there is just an indicator that we can turn that around and see, I want to take care of myself this year. And if I want to take care of myself this year, one of the ways I can do that is changing the way that I'm talking to myself about these things this year, right?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
Going back to work meetings and working in a work dynamic, sometimes there are those moments when no matter how clearly you share an idea, your boss or colleagues just don't seem receptive, right?
Yeah.
What's your advice for handling those moments without feeling shutting down completely?
Yeah. So I think in those moments, our practice is really to be able to stay open when we want to close down, right? And so it is, again, it's noticing that want to shut down in the moment or the want to argue in the moment. And for us to tell ourselves in the moment, stay open, right? It's reminding ourselves that we can have, different opinions, we can disagree, and we can also declare that in the moment, right? We can just say, okay, it sounds like we have really different ideas of this going forward. And maybe we need to think about it more and come back to it. Or maybe it's one of those situations where it is just, okay, we have a different understanding of what's happened. And that's
Yeah.
it, right? And even though that feels really uncomfortable in our body to admit that, right? It's not easy to do. We have to force stop ourselves sometimes to keep the integrity of the conversation intact because, it's often, I think of it as, people are dangling ropes. And if we pull the rope, they pull the rope, it's just tension on both sides. But if we just see the rope dangling there and we don't grab it, then we've just saved ourselves a lot of, frustration and overwhelm. So our work in these situations is to understand, okay, did I grab the rope? Are we playing tug of war here? If we're playing tug of war, I'm going to have to drop the rope and I'm going to declare that, right? And just say, we can agree the sky is blue today, right?
Yeah.
That kind of idea.
And declaring our disagreement is far better and, may I say, more productive than just shutting down, right?
Yes.
Because that really helps no one. It doesn't help me, doesn't help my colleagues. It's in nobody's favor, right?
Yeah. And it's this idea of being able to, you're going to handle it and declare it. Right? Yeah.
Now let's shift gears. One of the things that really drew me to your work is that you combine the importance of communication with mindfulness, right? I'm really curious. I'm really curious about your take on this. As you know, in STEM, we often push to go faster and more efficient, but I found that this pace can sometimes lead to stress and burnout.
Yeah.
In your book, The Pause Principle, sorry, your book your book is called The Pause Principle, which is very interesting because in STEM, we're basically trained to react immediately. Why is taking that pause so powerful, especially when the stakes are high?
Yeah. So it is similar to what you were saying, right? Often when we're going fast, our speed is quick, right? We have a tendency to burn out faster or feel more stressed, but we also have a tendency to make more mistakes and to, rush through things and then have to double back on our work and redo, right?
Yeah.
So the pause is incredible because, well, it's very uncomfortable to do because of the fast-paced environment, right? So the discomfort is there, but when you slow down, when you really start to pay attention and you take these moments, in these moments, you start to think clearly. You start to create space for yourself so that you can handle what is in front of you and so that you can focus on one thing at a time. So, what you end up doing by pausing is you actually change your relationship to time because what you can see is in that moment, you get to see that you can handle what's in front of you and you get to make a plan and you get to choose where your energy is going. Basically, there's a story I love where there's this story of this guy on a horse and he's, going through this neighborhood and there's a guy on the street and he's like, "Where are you going?" to the guy on the horse. And the guy on the horse is like, "I don't know, ask the horse." And I feel that what the pause does is it makes it so that you are the one in control of the horse, right? You have the reins, you're steering it here, you're steering it there. It's not the one, taking you down this path and that path, right? And
Yeah.
that's really what the pause gives you. It gives you the ability to make smarter choices.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you tell us a story about a leader or a team that transformed their culture just by shifting how they communicated or by incorporating the pause principle in their daily meetings or regular
Mhm.
meetings?
Yeah, I mean, I see it all the time, right? I see how just by being able to lead a meeting in a way that is more open, where it is easy for people to express themselves, share different ideas, be able to, you know, speak up in situations where before it maybe would feel more judgmental or challenging, right?
Yeah.
Once we start bringing this in, what ends up happening is we create an environment, like a more trusting environment.
Hmm.
So people are more willing to share, people are more productive. There's more loyalty that comes from this as well, more creativity that comes out of this, right? Because it's no longer people sharing an idea and being cut down right away, or it's no longer people being nervous to express themselves. So
Yeah.
you have a lot more collaboration that happens and a lot more coming together that happens that changes teams and changes organizations.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. The concept of mindfulness sometimes feels a bit abstract. How does it actually show up in leadership, especially when someone is under pressure and has to make a tough decision?
Mhm. Yeah, so mindfulness is really paying attention to what's happening when it's happening without judgment or evaluation, right? So when you're in a
Hmm.
leadership position, you really have to be able to be flexible, right? You really have to be able to adapt. You really have to be able to be in these challenging, high stakes situations and not give over to reactivity, right? Because it can really break trust. It can just, create a lot of chaos within a team.
Yeah.
So what mindfulness really does is makes it so that in these moments you can become more responsive. You know what is urgent. You know what's a wildfire and what's a barbecue pit, right? You're really
Hmm.
able to become more of an observer. So you're not stuck in what's happening, but you're on the outside really noticing and seeing all the different parts and how they play together. And because of that, you're able to see clearly. And then from being able to see clearly, you're able to, think clearly. And then you can start to trust more what it is that you're thinking and knowing because you have enough space that you've created, right? You're not cluttered, you're not overwhelmed, you're not feeling like these are coming at you all the time because you've really created that space to be able to see all the different pieces, right? And
Hmm.
so mindfulness really comes in because you're then able to control the situation more.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. From your work, with other organizations, what are the most common communication pitfall women in STEM fall into? And how can mindfulness and intentional communication help them navigate those challenges?
Well, I think it's a lot of what we talked about or what you touched on, right? In terms of um, expressing ourselves and being able to, uh, share our ideas and have them be heard, and not, not speaking up in situations for fear of either being interrupted or, being talked over, those types of moments.
Yeah.
And it really, what this work really does is it builds that confidence to be able to be in those situations, to trust what is happening within you, right?
Hmm.
So you really learn to work through like the chaos that's going inside, that's
Yeah.
keeping you stuck or keeping you uh, from speaking, right?
Hmm.
And so you learn to then work through that, move it to the side so that then you can access your words, you can access your language, and you can access that part of you that is ready to, express yourself, and then you do it. And so it really builds that confidence. It really builds that muscle to be able to command the interaction, right? Instead of being more of a passive player, you become a really active, engaged player in the conversation or in the meeting itself.
Yeah, of course. The pause principle, the way that I see it, it applies in our personal relationships as well as in our professional relationships, of course. But I'm interested about how do you adapt your approach when you teach intentional communication to CEOs and managers and C-level
Mhm.
staff versus when you teach it or coach early career professionals, young professionals, and people
Mhm.
who just started in the job market.
Yeah. I really wish I could say there is a difference, but there is not a difference because it really is starting in the same place, right? It all starts with really understanding what's happening within our bodies, and
Yeah.
then moving to um, finding ways to create calm within the body so that then we can access the words and then we can access the language. It's changing the way that we're talking to ourselves. It's changing the way that we're talking to others. It's learning how to use silence in a way that brings us together as opposed to like powering over or, pushing away. And it's learning how to navigate difficult conversations. So the only thing that is different in terms of the teaching is the context, right? So the examples that come out or the challenges that are coming in. It's more,
Mhm.
how do I deal with this situation? And the situation is different, right?
Mhm.
But what's actually happening is the same.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think this is what makes it powerful. It's accessible
Yeah.
to whether you're just starting out and you're a fresh leader, or you're just starting
Mhm.
your first job, or you're a seasoned leader and a CEO in a company, right?
Yeah.
I think that's what makes it very powerful. Everyone can learn to pause a little bit, reflect, and
Mhm.
be aware of the situation before
Yeah, and
they.
it helps you access your language, right? And all
Mhm.
of us have that already within us. And so it's not necessarily about scripts or dialogue partners or things like that. It really is using your everyday to start to pay attention to what's happening in the interaction and knowing, how can I be patient in this interaction? How can I be helpful to this other person in this interaction? How can I see what's going on clearly without judgment or evaluation, right? How can I be using language that is necessary. So it really does touch at all different levels, whether it's in your personal life at home with your family, whether it's at the top, whether it's in the you know it works in all stages.
That's so great,
Yeah.
Cynthia. I I agree. Um, let's give our listeners something that they can actually start using tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Let's make it today. Okay. So I'm gonna say it again. let's give our listeners something. Let's give our listeners something that they can actually start using today. If someone could start just one daily habit to improve their communication immediately, what would you suggest?
Cool. So I think that the one practice that you could start today is
Mhm.
setting an intention for your communication. So it really is starting to think about, how do I want to show up in my interactions?
Mhm.
So what is it that I want to practice today? Do I want to practice being patient? Do I want to practice being helpful? Do I want to practice being more direct? Right. So we start to think of, what is my intention for this interaction or this meeting, is a great place to start, because then everything then filters through that lens.
I love that. I absolutely love it. It's sitting like sort of like, what's my theme today?
Yeah.
Today, I want to be more patient.
Yes.
Today, I want to be more direct, and so
Hmm.
on and so forth. I absolutely love it.
And if you realize that you're actually not being those things, it's not about getting angry at yourself or judging yourself or mad at yourself. It's just noticing and then beginning again, right?
Yeah, that goes back to the first thing that we talked about today. The first piece of the puzzle is reflection. It's
Yeah.
not, pounding on ourselves and saying, oh, back
Right.
to the self-talk, right?
Yeah.
It's just realizing that happened. And so we're aware that it happened. Okay, I'll try to avoid it the next time,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly. Right. It doesn't mean it's bad. It doesn't mean it's good. Right. We don't have to attach meaning to it. We can just notice it and then
Hmm.
do it differently the next time.
Amazing. For so many of us, mentorship is a very important aspect of our
Mhm.
journey. From your perspective, how can mentors specifically help women and young professionals in STEM communicate more intentionally and advocate for themselves more effectively?
Mm. I think it's by modeling the communication that they want to see, right?
Mm. Mm.
So I think it's really modeling communication um, that is kind, honest, and helpful. That's concise. That's conscious. That's specific, right? And just modeling the pause. So giving it um, giving it permission to be there, I think, is really important, which means speaking slowly, which means taking those moments to think about what it is that you want to say in a way that will be heard. It means softening in those moments where you want to be hard, right? And I think that by modeling that behavior, then others learn from that. I have, in my training, there's a woman who she is in human resources, and just by her taking that a moment to close her eyes in her office, just a moment, it was like 10 seconds, it gave permission for, the person walking by to do the same thing. It's like we get to be the ones to model the behavior, which means we have to change the behavior.
I love that because it's so easy to talk, to
Yeah.
say, do this, don't do that.
Yes.
But the best way to teach something is to do it and let
Mhm.
others and let others observe that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, when it comes to communication, we want to be different, meaning we want to, if you think of the people around you who communicate in a way that you respect, or communicate in a way that seems more calm and grounded,
Mm-hmm.
they stand out because it's so different from what's around them. And so I think that it requires us to be different than what the norm is. And that's not always easy. And at the same time, it's so beneficial,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, for sure. If someone is listening and thinking, I want to take a step toward more intentional communication today, what's one small, yeah, yeah. All right. So, yeah, so this is the last question. So I'm just going to skip it. I'm just going to ask, where can people find you
Okay.
and do the outro? All right.
Okay.
Okay. Cynthia, this conversation has been incredible, both for me and I know for everyone listening. Before we go, where can people find you if they want to learn more about your work?
You can go to my website, cynthiakane.com. You can also find me on YouTube, and you can also look on Amazon for my books. They're there. So you can just type my name in.
Great. And that's Cynthia Kane, Kane with a K.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for being here today, Cynthia, and sharing all of this with us. I'll repeat it. Thank you so much for being here today, Cynthia, and sharing all of this with us. You know, we spend so much time in STEM perfecting our technical skills. But what you've reminded us today is that how we communicate those skills, how we show up, speak up, and stand our ground really determines our impact. For everyone listening, I hope you got as much out of this as I did. And next time you're in one of those meetings where your heart's racing and you need to speak up, try a pause. Let us know how it goes, and if you found this Let us know how it goes, and if you found this episode helpful, please share it with your friends and colleagues, leave us a review, and listen to our previous episodes. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you next time on We Rise Together podcast.